I call them creators. Some call them cartoonists, and some call them contributors, but I call them creators because they do create something from nothing. It's probably the most important word that, you know, you can have drive, you can have energy, you can all that, but the passion, the real feeling, that something that sets that antenna off. You don't have to be on a kind of an equal par with your creators because you can't do it anyway. But you do, you're part of their life, and in many cases you're part of their family. And it's just a wonderful experience because it's those people that really make the difference, and those people being the creators.
Well, I think that the comics page is a special place because it is where people go and they see themselves, where they connect with people.
We do get that comment though by reading your comic strip, I find that I'm not alone. That we get that over and over again from both comic strips, and it's really gratifying because it tells us that we're hitting the right note.
The fact is that they resonate to comics because it reflects life. This is the sociology of it. This is a mirror on your life, but exaggerated to a point where you see it more clearly. It gives you an extra insight and also a bit of humor about it. It shows you how absurd some of the problems that you've been facing seem to be when they're dealt with by a cartoonist.
If they have a favorite strip that they've been reading for years, they go, "Ah, here's an old friend." Or, "Ah, that's funny." It's just, here I am and I'm laughing. I'm laughing at a piece of paper. I think that is a wonderful thing.
It was interesting to see Hank evolve from Henry to Mr. Wilson, because even he said it at the end. He goes, "I'm really, the curmudgeon." Hank actually was Henry. I mean, that was an autobiographical deal.
He was wonderful. He took his own son and drew about he had a child named Dennis, and he took his own son and drew a cartoon about it and did a terrific job. I think that Hank Ketchum is to be congratulated. He opened a genre of a one-panel kid, and he had a cast of characters, the neighbors and Mrs. Wilson and so on.
I'm more Joey. I know I look like an old Joey, but we're not talking about this, but I don't relate to Dennis the Menace. I can understand him, and it's fun to draw him in different situations and his naivete in trying to be a help and yet a hindrance. Someone's either been a Dennis, had one, or, you can relate to what he's doing, and I think that keeps him popular.
Which is why it's really the story of every man. Every block has a Mr. Wilson, and a grouchy neighbor who really, and the parents and this kid's running around, and yeah. So it's there, so it's
found its niche.
I'm not aiming at children or people who own cats and love cats or people who love dogs or people on the left-hand side of the thinking and the right-hand side. I'm trying to draw for everybody.
You never know who reads it. You never know who. Once in a while, there's a surprise. The commandant of the Marine Corps, believe it or not, sent me a fan letter some couple of years ago. And he had no relationship to anything in my background, nothing that I was writing and drawing about. He came from another planet, you know. But he seemed to like it on some level. You take them where you find them. You never turn anyone away.
They tend to be technical people and people in offices. But I'll get email from nuns and little kids, so that they're all over the board. They tend to be people who are wise asses, basically.
I like to say that my audience is the smart, witty, and good-looking crowd.
I never know. I always sort of imagine that my audience is probably 20 and 30-somethings, and sort of brighter, more liberal 40-somethings.
Family Circus is appealing to little kids, to young adults who have little kids, to the middle-agers who remember when their kids were little, and to grandparents.
I'm drawing for Stefan. I write for myself. If I think it's funny, it goes in. Otherwise, not. I don't think about anybody reading the strip, really.
And that's the thing that I've really learned, is that if I'm bored, so are they. If I'm entertained, so are they.
It's a creative act. I feel like it's a form of meditation. So for me, I'm just trying to make myself laugh or try to learn something.
I mean, I think that to be a cartoonist, you have to be able to amuse yourself. And that's the truth test.
And so in the end, I draw for myself. That's my audience.
I guess I have to say that I work for myself. Because if I'm not happy with what I'm doing, I know that the audience won't be happy with what I'm doing. And so I create for myself.
Sometimes I think about me being 10 years old and reading that comics.
Our audience is parents, kids, grandparents, anybody who's been a kid. So I think that pretty much covers everybody.
Well, that's done by a good friend also. Jerry Scott and Rick Kirkman do Baby Blues.
Yes.
And it is a good family strip, exaggerated to the extent that even in the drawing, with the way the characters are drawn so tiny and with their big mouths, and the dad with his big nose, and mommy with the hair.
For Baby Blues, it's primarily people who have had kids, which is a broad range of folks, because we have readers from, all the way from kids learning to read to grandparents. But we try to keep very focused with that comic strip on issues family and small issues. Mostly the stuff that populates your home on a daily basis, the dust bunnies and the fingerprints on the refrigerator and the glop on the floor, underneath the dishwasher, and things like that everyone can recognize.
One of the things all of our friends and family and everything always comment that, that was always our house. It was our furniture. The layout was very similar, and so they would always crack up when they'd see our house in the strip. And actually, our house at the time looked a lot like that. A lot of all those things all over the floor. What a mess. Jeez.
There was also this perception that if you were a syndicated cartoonist, it was like winning the lottery, which was never true. I always, syndicated cartooning is kind of like the music business, because you try very hard to get a record deal. But that's the first part of the equation. Once you've got a record deal, then you've got to get a hit record. Otherwise, it's, you got a nice advance, and that's it, you're out of work again.
And a lot of aspiring cartoonists don't grasp that. They make that mistake that once you're syndicated, it's like getting the Holy Grail. That it's the road to riches. But 9 out of 10 comic strips that are launched by a syndicate fail within the first 5 years. 9 out of 10, and that one usually will fail within the next 10 years or stop being produced because either through burnout or just lack of ideas. So it's a very tough, competitive business.
I think maybe we all know how hard it is to get to a point where you control some of that real estate.
There's a very limited amount of real estate, and so people are fighting for different spots, fighting like drunks for different spots.
They don't make space for it. They don't create space. You have to knock another comic strip out. And no matter how mundane that comic strip is, it has fans.
Somebody's angry.
And someone's angry, and a lot of people, and they get letters and cancellations, and editors hate dealing with that. So it's you have to have a really good idea and be very funny and get a fan base really quickly now.
I think there are petty jealousies and just like in any family, and I think it is kind of a family. It's a pretty small universe of people that do this for a living or even want to do this for a living.
My strip almost didn't make it into the paper because it had no demographic. They have to be able to peg you for, this is the strip for teenage girls, this is a strip for retired people, and I just had a strip about a rat and a pig that discussed death, we find that demographic.
Sweden.
Yeah.
We're supportive of each other because I think we understand it's to get to a level of success. You usually don't fluke into it. You have to be able to write and create something that is saleable and interesting to a large number of people.
We're in this instant gratification age where in 1950, when Peanuts was launched, he was only in 7 comic strips. And it was a slow, gradual, 7 papers. But it was a slow, gradual growth. And nowadays, you just don't have that luxury. You've got to be good, fast, right away. And if it doesn't float, you're done. You're sunk.
I think the trouble with honoring people's work that are no longer with us is that there's not room for new people to interpret the world.
Personally, if you fill the comics pages with your strip for your retired people and your strip for your teenage girls and all that you don't leave room for just a funny strip. If you ask me, the one criteria would be, is it funny? If it's funny, put it in.
My main audience for the strips I write are my business partners, Rick Kirkman and Jim Borgman. I write jokes to make those guys laugh. With Zits, I think we're primarily entertaining parents of teenagers. We hear fabulous comments from readers. Teenagers that read the strip as well, but I think it's mostly parents who find some relief in reading about someone who has it as bad or worse than they do with teenage-ism around the house.
Well, Borgman is a master cartoonist. I have Jim Borgman editorial cartoons in my scrapbook, which I was keeping in the 70s. So I was always a big Borgman fan. And they really hit the magic spot with Zits.
It's just instant classic to me.
Yeah.
You can look at some art and realize this guy is innovative, he knows what he's doing, he's comfortable with it, and so your eye just flows through it. You don't get hung up on the art saying, well, why did he do that? Or it just feels natural.
We have to do a comic strip about teenagers, about teenage boys, without bringing up the subject of sex, which is a little like doing a comic strip about Detroit without talking about cars. But we're able to do it in very oblique ways, and I think it's one of those times when we succeeded.
Job of doing a cartoon strip. I said that it's something it was a dream of mine since I was 3 or 4 years old, but I had no idea how much work it is to do a daily comic strip. And now that I'm actually doing a daily comic strip, I think I'm more in awe of anybody who can just keep the deadline. It's for such what seems like a silly job, it's a lot of work to. There's no vacation. We're there every day, and you try your best. And, just to come up with that many ideas and execute, it's a really tough job. And I'm just impressed with the whole gang that we actually do it.
Yeah, because when I first got into this, I thought there was going to be this Hollywood coolness. Welcome, I hope she fails. But it wasn't like that at all. It was absolutely genuine camaraderie, genuine friendship.
How great is it that you can work in a business that you suddenly eventually maybe become a peer to the people that were your heroes. The first time I came to a Reuben Awards was in New York City at the Plaza Hotel in the early 80s maybe, or the late 70s. And I'd never been to New York before, and I'd never been in a tuxedo before. And we were at the Plaza Hotel, for crying out loud, and my wife and I got all dressed up, and we read the directions. We're supposed to go to the grand ballroom for cocktails, and we got on the elevator and went up to the grand ballroom, and the elevator doors opened to this roar of cocktail party with 500 cartoonists and spouses there, all in black tie. And there was Mort Walker over there, and, Jim Davis over there, and Charles Schulz, and it was so cool. We got back in the elevator, we ran down the stairs and came back up again and did it again, so the doors would open so we could see it again. What an experience. And now these guys are my pals.
And it's also the nicest group of people. When I became a member of the National Cartoonist Society, it's just like family. And maybe because we spend most of our times by ourselves and locked in rooms drawing away, that when we get together, we're just very joyous. But it's just a great giving group of people. And I think you see it in their work, and what's even nicer, you see it in their lives.
My problem is that I have too many stories, too many characters, and no time. Because when the strip started, it was very insular. The family was all together, mother, father, kid, dog, whatever was in the family. And everything rotated around the family and the kitchen table. And other people would come into that family, but then they would go out again.
Lynn's probably the greatest storyteller in the business today. She can write about real family stuff. She can keep a story going for years and keep people coming back to read it. She draws the heck out of that comic strip too. She really understands, where her characters live and all that. So,
Well, now all the characters have grown up, and they have their own relationships outside. And so suddenly I've got this myriad of characters, some of whom are of great interest to people. People who own garages, for example, want to know a lot more about Gordon and his expanding garage and his flourishing business. Well, I don't have time to delve into Gordon's life while Elizabeth is having a love affair with a helicopter pilot.
So she's doing something that Gasoline Alley did. She's having them grow older. She's not keeping them as they are, which is what most of us do. But she's having her children grow and change and so forth. And that's risky. She's a risk taker.
It's a real family that exists for many people who honestly believe the characters exist. And they will write letters to Michael Patterson and say, well, one girl wrote and said, you shouldn't marry Deanna, you should marry me. And she sent all kinds of photographs to Michael. And you say, this is a cartoon character. And when the dog died, I mean, people were in tears and writing letters. And I mean, people are very, very connected to the characters. And so I have to be true to the characters and true to the people who are reading about what I'm doing.
The trouble is that they're growing up so quickly, you forget who's who. All of a sudden, little April has become a young lady almost, and of course that takes a lot of forward-looking imagination. You have to know where you're going with the characters when you start a strip like that.
That's one of the few comics that still has a little bit of that Little Orphan Annie appeal in the sense that she does long storylines, and people love it. I mean, it's always in the top polls.
And we get maybe 100 emails a day from people asking, well, what's happened to so-and-so? Whatever happened? Even Charles Schultz used to say, well, whatever happened to Aunt Myrna? Whatever happened to Uncle Phil? Whatever happened to all these people he would name off? And I would say, well, you did it too. You got rid of Pigpen and some of these other characters.
People see them every day in the newspapers. It's a rare art form, so they really do become family. And I think Lynn proves that more than anybody.
It's like a sitcom, in a way, but it's like going to be a 30-year-long sitcom.
For the past 23 years, Frank Willard's famous comic strip character, Moon Mullins, has brought entertainment to millions of people.
That was my favorite strip when I was growing up. My father, I started off before I could read. I'd go out and get the paper and I'd bring it in on the bed, and my father would read it to me, and he'd get to laughing so hard. And I can remember one particular strip where I guess Willie was mad, Moon was mad at Willie because Willie had done something to a pig, and he was chasing Willie, and first thing you know, he said, oh, now they've passed the pig. And my father just laughed, and his tears came down his cheek, and I thought at that moment, I think, gee, I'd like to do that to people. I'd like to make them suffer like that and laugh till it ached.
Maggie and Jiggs, Bringing Up Father was what the cartoon was called, and drawn by George McManus, who, when I was a kid, he was just an idol of mine because of the meticulous line work that he did, especially on his Sunday pages. He had gorgeous decorations and banisters and the stairways and the marble halls, and he did a wonderful job. and Jiggs was such a reprobate, a character that cigar smoking and a corned beef and cabbage guy that was, and Maggie was the nagging wife, and she was a very, very strong opposition to Jiggs.
In the late 60s, there was a whole revival of trying to find the old comic strips. So I was just starting to be a teenager then, so I was able to pick up Crazy Cat reprints and Barney Google reprints and all these old comics that had an anarchy to them. So I think, they were sort of hippie-ish and kind of weird. And Crazy Cat probably being the weirdest of them all. Boy, when I saw Crazy Cat at the age of 13 for the first time, I just intuitively said, I wasn't sure what it was about, but I just knew it was something really special. So years later, I had the pleasure to write a book about George Herman, so I got to meet his granddaughter and did a lot of research on him, but boy, I'd sure love to sit down with him and talk about the biz.
When I first started cartooning, early 70s, Hap Clyburn was my main influence, and at that point in my life, I was in my early 20s. I didn't look at newspaper cartoons anymore and hadn't in years.
Getting more serious about getting syndicated, you just stop looking at the other cartoonists. At least in my case, I did. I put everything down, and I just sort of tried to let my writing go in a direction that was comfortable for myself.
I'd say that my influences, while I enjoyed the Sunday Comics page, that my influences were outside of it. So my childhood influences were Shel Silverstein, who drew Where the Sidewalk Ends. And then my biggie influence was when I was in 8th grade, and the artist in town, and greeting cards and stickers and mugs was Boynton. And for the longest time, I thought that Boynton was a David or a George. And then I found out that Boynton was a Sandra. And there was that kind of, moment of, if she could do it, then I could do it.
See, this is the reason I became a cartoonist. Walt Kelly, I mean, he had, he was just, he had everything. The volume, the mass, the movement, the technique. Oh, man. This is the perfect comic strip.
The perspective.
I mean, he was just unbelievable.
The amount of drawing that he put into incidental things, like the logs floating in the water in the background, and the characters were just so cute. I mean, you couldn't help but love them. And I understand that Hank Ketchum and Walt Kelly worked at Disney during the same period.
Right.
And had a lot of respect for each other. And I can understand why. They knew good art when they saw it.
Well, Dennis the Menace, I grew up reading Dennis the Menace. And always loved the line work. And I used to practice making sure I used to draw Dennis the Menace, making sure that I did the hairs just right, place the eyebrow in the hair just right, the way you draw ears. And I used to practice that over and over and over again. I probably could have worked as an assistant when I was about 10 years old.
Hagar! You're a dirty, disgusting pig!
And your point is?
Look at this mess! That's the last time you eat crackers in bed!
Oh, don't be so picky, Helga. Lots of husbands eat crackers in bed.
I'm talking about crackers spread with peanut butter, jelly, cream cheese, pickles, mustard, ketchup, and relish.
I started with plain crackers, and I guess I got carried away.
Hagar on the surface appears to be something like the battling Bickersons, where Hagar and Helga are angry at each other and fight all the time. But the truth of the comic strip is that Hagar loves Helga. Hagar and Helga love each other. And that is the subtext of the strip, is that Hagar is a strip about a husband and father and businessman living exactly 1,000 years ago. And what he does is he does anything he has to in the world when he's away from home in order to protect and provide for his family. And he does horrible things, which we don't show. But he does, he does these unthinkable, terrible things, and then he comes home to provide for his family, and he comes home and he's exhausted because he's been in all this havoc. And then he goes down the hill to the tavern, and he gets on the boat, and he goes and he fights more battles.
It was drawn originally by Dick Browne. He originated the strip, and he looked just like Hagar. And it's been taken over by his son after Dick's untimely death. And Chris has not only drawn the strip to look just like his father drew it, he has gotten to look just like his father.
We have heard that my father had a red beard, and I've got some copper in my beard. At least I think at the beginning of the strip I did. And we've heard that was from the Viking raids, that the Vikings brought the famous red hair to Ireland. That was actually Viking stuff, So
pretty much Dick Browne was Hagar. Looked like him, It's amazing. He just built a strip around himself.
Dick Browne was like the cartoonist's cartoonist. You hear that a lot, but he was truly one of them. And a lot of people learned to draw from him. He had this wonderful, clean style.
One thing I liked about Hagar so much was it was such a different style for the time. It was very modern compared to the other stuff that was being drawn. The way he did his line work and shading was, very much the whole style of the way things were going in the 70s with that sort of artwork.
I didn't know Dick Browne. I wish I had. His son, Chris Browne, who's intimately involved in carrying Hagar on, is one of the dearest, sweetest, coolest, funniest guys in the world. That guy could make me laugh at any point in time.
I'm very proud that that Hagar was the first and probably will always be the only comic strip that ever actually depicted the main character of the comic strip cutting somebody's head off. You know, that's it was very small and it was in the background. It was one of the strips that my dad drew. But he shows Hagar in battle in silhouette, and he's going like this, and this guy's head is going up in the air like a champagne cork. And I thought, well, you know, that's something you'll never see Dagwood do, you know, so probably. That's the highest compliment you can pay a cartoonist is to cut out their cartoon and put it on their refrigerator, you know, or if they're actually talking to you one-on-one and you blow milk out your nostrils, or I guess the grown-up version is vodka. If you blow vodka out your nostrils, it's a very high compliment, you know.
And people just want to chuckle in the morning. It's as simple as that. I mean, you know, look at the front page. Wouldn't you want to chuckle, you know?
Boy, I don't care what happens to you. If you can find some way to laugh about it, you're saved. It's good for the stomach, it's good for the blood pressure, it's good for the heart.
It's having a sense of humor. If you can see the humor and the absurdity of some of the things that people take so seriously, if you can burst out laughing instead of punching and kicking or throwing bombs or whatever you do, I think that's the saving grace of mankind. I think we have to keep our sense of humor and our sense of proportion to what really matters and what is just silly and funny.
I'm at it every day, even though my wife doesn't like to take me shopping very much. I go into a store, she says, now behave yourself. I'm always trying to make jokes with people, no matter what.
All I try to do is make people laugh for 10 seconds a day. That's my whole goal. My philosophy is that no matter what else is bothering you, a good laugh is going to help. So it'll make everything a little bit better. That's probably the best I can do, and that's pretty good. You're always looking for a topic where there's absurdity built in. If the situation itself is absurd, then it's really easy to write the humor part. And business is just inherently absurd because your basic dynamic is you have a boss who is doing everything he can to make it impossible for you to do your job, and then evaluating you on your performance. So, that's just one example. Everything about it is just a little bit wrong, which is just perfect for what I do. I get a lot of complaints. Basically, any topic you talk about that references any group or organization, you're gonna hear from them. So, I did a cartoon about a unicorn being barbecued, just one example. And of course, I heard from the people who were some organization of unicorn lovers. They were very offended by that. And more recently, I did a cartoon about the fictitious country of Albonia using leprechauns that they discovered under their mud as their main export for meat. And then I heard from the Irish, who thought that it was not funny that leprechauns might be eaten. So I get a lot of complaints, and mostly they just make good stories, so they don't bother me too much.
you don't get feedback immediately, and very rarely do you do, but when you do, in fact, in my town, my comic strip appears in my hometown paper, so I do get feedback from people.
I'm sorry, we're going to talk about you again. But it's to get that feedback that you made somebody laugh. That makes your day, and that's why you do it. It's corny, but it's true.
My thing is like, no one sees it, you know? Other people might go, the whole world is seeing it. And so to get social feedback is wonderful. And I am a social person. My ideas, my comic strip comes from kind of trash picking around at the world and picking up bits. It doesn't come from a deep, dark wellspring within me. So I like it when the world that I'm living in comes back and tells me that this resonates with them.
In my case, it means fulfilling my lifelong ambition. Since I was 5, that's all I wanted to do. Specifically, I wanted to draw newspaper comic strips.
And this is Mel Lazarus, who is a brilliant, incredibly gifted cartoonist and has been for years, doing Our Miss Peach and Mama. And I think everything he does is hilarious. I think Mel is one of the funniest, most talented men living. And what do I think of him? I think he's great.
When I started in this business, it was like the beginning of the end of the golden era of comics. Which gave me the privilege of knowing people and becoming friends of people like Milton Caniff, who did Terry and the Pirates, and Steve Canyon, and Al Cap, Lou Labner, and Walt Kelly. I mean, these were the giants. And I actually had an opportunity for, quite a few years to walk among them and to get to know them, become their friends. And discovered they were enormously generous, treated me as though I were one of them. And it was a lot of fun.
Mel Lazarus, brilliant cartoonist, incredible human being, one of the coolest guys you'll ever meet. Funny, body, and incredibly nurturing. Terrific mentor for the younger cartoonists.
I think we'd have a lot more fun. I think I'd have enjoyed inventing a couple of new ideas along the way, and I'd certainly enjoy reading a couple of new strips every year. When a new strip comes into a newspaper now, it's always going to knock something else out. But the supposition is that it could be there forever.
I think within the NCS, Mel Lazarus is probably maybe the most loved person since Schultz. All of us just think the world of him. I think that most people are good at heart. I'm the sort of person that thinks that most people will do the right thing under most circumstances.
Once you know somebody personally, you transcend race, color, religion, everything. I mean, you'll hear about all these tragedies in other countries, and it's just images. But every single person who is fighting for their home and maybe destroys the life of someone else could be me or you. But one-on-one, when we know each other, there's an affection and a love.
the thing that gives me the most encouragement about like the future of the world is every once in a while I'll have some very casual interaction with somebody's kid who just seems really bright and optimistic, and you look at him and you say, you know, I've seen a lot of kids lately that don't look like they're going to make the world a better place, but this one might. You know, this one's got something. And every time that happens, I feel kind of optimistic.
I also happen to believe that most people are relatively self-centered, maybe by design. And so we tend to do a lot of things out of thoughtlessness and selfishness, both to each other and to the entire planet. And that bothers me. I think there's way too many humans on the planet, way too many. And if people thought about it, they'd stop having so many children. 1 per couple is plenty. None per couple would be even better for quite a while. With so many people comes just a hell of a lot of thoughtless destruction of each other and the rest of the planet and the animal kingdom and the environment and the air and you name it. So, but at the same time, it's a love-hate relationship with the species because we're good people. We just don't see it that way. You know, I mean, all animals are relatively selfish. That's what keeps them alive. That's part of your survival instinct is to be selfish. But when you're really good at surviving, the selfishness becomes a problem.
And I hope that cartooning, I hope that in some way I'm part of a profession that's contributing to people looking at a broad picture and getting a laugh from it and enjoying the foibles of mankind and the absurdities of life. I have to hope that that's going to make some kind of an impact on society.
I don't think our job is to present big issues and enlighten people in any way. I think we're like a 10-second little frosting on top of like the daily cupcake. You know, it's like if I can make somebody smile, that's the end of my job. You know, that's it, and then tomorrow's another day.
The job of our cartoonist is the essential job. You literally start with a blank piece of paper every day, and need to fill it with something that comes from somewhere, from God, from somewhere. And the job of filling it is challenging. I think we're all very honored and horrified to have the blank piece of paper to deal with every day. So every day we get a new chance too. You get a fresh blank piece of paper. So it's a microcosm or a metaphor for all of life. Really, is what we do for a living.
Since I was a little kid, I love a really funny single panel cartoon. Something that you look at, you think it's one thing, you read it, and your brain goes, bam, and it hits you and you laugh. I love to have my own mind sort of flipped over to understand something, and then, it hits you and you laugh.
Dan Ferrara, what an original. That guy, he's, Dan looks like a cartoonist ought to look and acts like a cartoonist ought to act like. A lot of the rest of us look more like pharmacists than we do cartoonists. And God bless Dan for being funny.
One of my cartoons that comes to mind is a guy, walking down the street like this, regular businessman walking down the street, and he says, I'm sorry about the reception on my, he goes, I'm sorry about the bad, okay, so let me start again. Sorry about the bad reception, Frank. I lost my cell phone last week. This is a chocolate eclair. And he looked closely, and the little black thing in his hand is not a phone. It's just like a little chocolate eclair. And those are the kind of cartoons that I've always loved since I was a little kid.
When I think of a Bizarro, I think of a drawing style that this is a guy that can draw anything and also can draw the background of anything.
I'm aware of the fact that any creative effort worth absorbing, seeing, hearing, reading, whatever, has got to be something that came from that person's own experience and feelings and perspective. So I do try to throw a lot of myself in there. And I do have a different perspective on the world than the average Walmart shopper.
I come from the school of once the idea's across, you can stop drawing. And I think that Dan Ferraro just must really enjoy filling up the space with everything that's going on.
I'm a smart ass who can draw. And that's really kind of all it amounts to.
One of the things that gives me the most concern in the world is that information is coming, I believe, is coming from the top down. And so a smaller group of news outlets are able to disseminate information to everybody. And there's no way to tell whether it's true or it's not true.
It's people being closed-minded and not opening their eyes to possibilities, being tunnel vision and seeing only their side of a story or not seeing any side of a story, just believing what they've been told, being indoctrinated.
And one of the things that I found very difficult was that the whole structure of the news story was who, what, where, when, and how. And you weren't supposed to approach the why. Well, the why is always the most interesting question. The why is about human motivation. And just the who, what, where, when, and how, that's just nothing. That's nothing to me.
There again, you've got a problem with the just sort of the prudishness and fear of the American public. People don't want to see provocative pictures or ideas in the newspaper because, God forbid, their child might see it. And then what? Question that I asked all my life, then what?
And I hope that cartooning, I hope that in some way I'm part of a profession that's contributing to people looking at a broad picture.
The comics page can and should look like America. It should be kind of everybody should be there.
It is a very, very gratifying thing to know that we've been in the newspaper every day since February 29th, 1960. We started in 19 newspapers, and now we're in well over 1,500 papers all over the world.
I think this is one of the nicest strips that has ever happened. I think it's one of the most, it's warm, it's comforting, it gives you a bright spot in the day.
Keane is such a character, and this panel has more people calling it their favorite than I think any other comic that I know of. And he defies all of the any rules that I can come up with for a successful comic strip now, which is hard hitting and funny and fast paced. And here Bill is slow paced, sweet, doesn't have a funny joke every day, tugs at the heartstrings instead more often.
It's hard to find another strip that's touched as many people as Bill has with that.
When we first started, and I started the Family Circle, I call it the Family Circle, and it ran under that title for 6 months before a magazine by the same title decided that was the name of their magazine, and they didn't want it over the top of a cartoon.
I think he called it Family Circle, but the magazine didn't like that, so they had to change it to Family Circus. But it's the type of thing that I try to find universal truths. I don't care about the Pulitzer Prize. I want the refrigerator prize. I want something that resonates in people's hearts and experiences. They cut it out and they put it on the refrigerator. That's the prize I'm looking for. And that's what he does all the time. You find that thing all over refrigerators and bulletin boards.
We don't get too many that they don't like with Family Circus. Mostly it's a cartoon that they really love, and they write and say how much it meant to them, or how did you see into our living room last Thursday? The same thing happened in our house, because my stuff is based on the stuff that our kids did. Jeff is the model for little Jeffy in the cartoon, and of course I do see into other people's houses through the mail.
Then you have something for everybody. And what Bill has consistently done and what Jeff is consistently doing is the warm, wonderful, natural family stuff that we all desperately look for when we go to the comics page. And the comics page is changing, and Family Circus gives you that same rainbow and that same ray of sunshine every single day.
I think that the cartoonists like it because they've grown up reading it. Most of the cartoonists today, they come to me, and these are guys that'll be Jeff's age or even older, that say, I remember I learned to read from your Family Circus.
Comics as part of society, let's say, are really important in the same way that, Pez candy is important, Not vital. You don't need it to live. You don't need it to feed your kids or to put gas in your car, but it's something that we sort of crave and like and enjoy as a treat.
Cartooning has been around for a long time. It was developed here. It's like people like to say it's that and jazz are the only authentic American indigenous art forms.
It has become such a part of American society, I think, almost subconsciously for a lot of people. Some of the words that comics have added to the American lexicon. Charles Schulz did so many with security blanket and happiness is a warm puppy and sayings like that that we just use now and don't really think about the origins. Comics have contributed.
But yeah, I think there always will be. I think people just love to see that combination of art and literature. Somebody just sits down and starts telling a story and drawing a little picture of it and continue to tell a story and draw a little picture, and it's endlessly fascinating for some reason.
Back here, Beetle.
I'm late for lunch.
Ha! You'll never catch me, Sarge!
I based the strip on my experiences at the University of Missouri. I based all my characters on real people. I had a real professor, all my fraternity brothers were in the strip. I used their nicknames, and I've always been able to keep track of my characters that way by basing them on real people. Sergeant Snorkel, for instance, is a sergeant that I had. His name was Octavian Savu, and he was tough. We'd run every time we saw him coming because he would yell and scream at us. One day we came back from a particularly tough day, and there on our pillows, on our bed, was a poem from Sergeant Savu to my boys. And we all looked at each other and thought, the guy's got a heart? I don't believe it. It was just such an experience, to see somebody get sentimental over his boys, the same boys he was going to kill, earlier in the day. So that's what I did with my Sergeant Snorkel. He's that way. He's tough as nails, but he's got a heart of gold somewhere, if you can only find it. Lieutenant Jack Flapp was the first black character that came into a strip, at that time anyway, as a real person of his own, a person of dignity, a lieutenant, an officer, and he was not going to be pushed around. And the captain says something like, you need some help around here, and Sarge says, yeah, I need help. And Lieutenant Flapp walks in and says, how come there are no blacks in this honky outfit? Sarge says, help. So that's how he was introduced, and boy, I tell you, I got into a flap about Flapp.
Oh, I remember that. That was great when he introduced Lieutenant Flapp. That's one thing, with it's amazing with comics what a huge splash something like that would make. Now we look at it and think, well, what's the big deal?
A lot of papers dropped it. They didn't. They thought I was proselytizing for black causes, and a lot of the blacks thought I was stereotyping blacks, and just all kinds of. You couldn't do anything right, in other words. But I just hung in there, and I just persisted in it, and next thing I knew, everybody loved him. And I got all my papers back that dropped it. Picked up a lot of papers in the Caribbean and various places like that where they had a black audience. So he's been a member of my cast since 1970.
Because when I was growing up, I ran out in the front yard and picked up my paper because I wanted to get the comics. Today, they're not running out in the front yard and picking up the paper. They're on their computer as well.
I hope the comics become more relevant to the lives of young people. I hope more young people read the comics.
Well, I don't think it's changed. I think, we have to change because the market out there is changing. We've got to develop features. We've got to take risk on features.
You wonder if the way that cartoons are going to be more relevant is for some kind of format change, like we talked about earlier, where it's not just a tiny little 6x2-inch strip anymore. So I don't exactly know how they're going to become more relevant, but.
I want people to care. I want people to go to the comics, and I want it to be something that they have to read.
A lot of times people will come to me and they say, well, I don't really like this strip or that strip, but I really like Doonesbury or something. They say, well, that's okay. If you just happen to like one comic strip, you're not supposed to like all of them. They're for different audiences, and that's what's great about the comics page. There's something there for everybody.
And we can find things that are just suited for the internet. And as I said, we'll never do it in print. And you've got to be able to give creators that type of exposure. I'm not talking about tasteless things. I'm talking about that you've got to be a little bit more sophisticated in saying, from the standpoint of the market's ready for this now. And again, you may fall on your face, but the market is ready for it. Take more chances.
Cathy is a great winner with women, because women have the same problem of finding the right clothes to wear and controlling their diet and their weight and everything. And the angst that she goes through, I think, just resonates throughout the female world.
Cathy and I have known each other for a long time. And Cathy and I have battled weight for a long time. And we're both chocoholics.
I don't often relate to it because I seldom go into a dressing room and try on a dress. Sometimes.
She was probably one of the people that kept me sane through that first year, just knowing if Cathy could do it, so could I. If someone else who every time they looked in the mirror saw overweight and who ate chocolate at 4 in the morning.
I'm really far from caring about some of the stereotypical things that women care about, like weight issues, bathing suit issues, fashion. I mean, I have the same fashion sense that I had in the 8th grade, and not much has changed.
Not being a 20-something woman who was worried about my weight, I can't say that it's the first one I go to, but I have a great admiration for the accomplishment. It certainly is perfectly done for the people that she's writing it for.
When I first met Cathy Guisewite here, she was the one that I called to say, how do I do this? How do I do a comic strip? I have no idea, because I was invited to do a comic strip. I had just done single panel doodles, and someone sent them to the syndicate, as did Cathy's mom. And I called Cathy, and she said, I write short stories. I write it all down on paper first, and then I keep it in my head and I transfer it to the comic strip, because I'm a writer primarily and an artist second.
She makes fun of her ability, her drawing ability, deprecates it, but I think that Cathy is drawn exactly the way it should be drawn. Any other way and it wouldn't be personal.
I've always been impressed by how well she writes, and her parents are hysterical. She comes by her talent very honestly. Her mother really is like that. Great fun.
My feeling is that if you're a cartoonist and you can't be having, I'm not going to have it, even talking with all the people, you have to make it teach them, all the seating they can't follow people. I'm not going to put them right back on the wall, and I'm not the same thing, but what the theme, what the Constitution and lettering the thing in English or whatever, to can't trade for freedom myself, and I was up, right?
Pardon me for California, I can't keep up.
Yes. So I hope I made that clear anyway.
I don't know. It's like it doesn't. It's just...
One of the things I loved about Peanuts was that all the girls were very strong and the guys were very weak. And it was exciting to read dialogue from children that, even though it was adult dialogue, was really the way they thought.
Well, Peanuts was a very influential strip. I think that Schultz inspired a lot of cartoonists to sort of get deeper into human emotions and feelings.
My grandfather would criticize the strips and say, children can't think that way, they don't talk that way. And as a little kid, I would say, well, of course they do. We just can't use the same words you do, but we have those feelings.
I know many contemporary cartoonists that say that they would not be cartoonists today without the influence of Charles Schultz when they were growing up in the 50s and 60s.
Charles Schultz is definitely the reason I became a cartoonist. When I read, growing up in the early 60s, I mean, that comic spoke directly to me. And, it's funny, as a kid, I wasn't aware of its melancholy at all. In reading it, to me, it was just pure happiness. I mean, and I think it was in the way he drew. I mean, Schultz used to call a quality in his line warmth, that it just had such a, just emitted happiness from the actual pen line itself. And
what an innovator.
Talking about simplicity.
Yeah.
And saying a lot with a line.
I know.
He was another one who just knew how to
going
throw a line.
He basically started with a conventional kid strip, and it just slowly evolved very gradually into the Peanuts that we know today. So by the end of the 50s, the characters with their personalities interacting with each other and basically just trying to figure the world out.
He's a brilliant guy, and he has brilliant work, and I have to say that I was not a fan of it as a young man. As a teenager and a young man, I thought it was boring and predictable, and it seemed dull to me. I didn't get it. Then as I got older, I read a biography, maybe even it might have been his autobiography. Anyway, let's just say I read something, and about his life and how his cartoon fit into the history of cartoons. And when I saw that, bing, this light went off, and I thought, oh my God, he invented what I'm doing now. And, psychological humor, relationship humor. And then I was suddenly just blown away by the brilliance of it. And all of his work since then has made a world of sense to me.
One of the things I noticed is, because of the fact that adults are almost never seen in Peanuts, you get the feeling that these kids are basically kind of on their own to figure the world out. So they're all wrestling with these real adult problems, because maybe there's nobody there to explain it to them. They're sort of figuring out on their own. So it has a duality where they're children and they're innocent and they're kind of naive and they're cute and all that, which is what the kids like about this strip. But then there's this whole other deeper level that has to do with adult psychology.
I used to be one of his detractors, and at this point in my life, I'm one of his greatest defenders because cool people come up to me all the time and say, when are they going to stop running that boring Peanuts crap? It's been the same forever, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what's so good about it. And I go, you got to look at it historically, man. This guy invented what everybody else is doing. And I go into my spiel, and I usually can convert him because, I mean, who's going to really stick to their guns over hatred of peanuts? What's the point? So,
the classic is Sparky Schultz with Peanuts. Particularly, and again, I know I keep coming back to this, but as a foreigner, I had no idea how much that was woven into the tapestry of the country. It's only when you hear and you sort of realise just how pervasive that thing was.
Yeah.
When they send in moonshots, with the Snoopy module.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I've had lunch with Sparky before, and actually I would want to do it again because I miss him. I mean, he was my hero, cartoon-wise.
He was a guy that could talk about so many things not cartooning, and that I find interesting when you're with another cartoonist, because we're a group of people that are pretty good at a lot of things, but not really excellent at one thing. And there's a breadth of knowledge and experience there, I think, among really good cartoonists that is fascinating. And I think we're most interesting when we don't talk about what we do for a living. How many times can you examine pen points and the pros and cons of adding 3 drops of water to your ink? I'd rather talk about human nature, things like that, with cartoonists. So Sparky was a great thinker and conversationalist.
And never in my life did I believe I would ever meet Charles Schultz, much less borrow his car and wear his shoes one day. We went for a walk and I had high-heel shoes, so he gave me a pair of sneakers, stuffed the toes full of Kleenex, and I walked for a mile in his shoes.
In his case, he did everything himself, The one-man show, did it for such a long time and kept at the top of his game for such a long time. That's a tough thing to do. It's something that everybody aspires to.
I knew the man behind it, and I knew that we are all of the characters that we draw. There are days when he was as crabby as Lucy and as fragile as Charlie Browne, as insightful as Linus, as magical as Snoopy, I mean, as arrogant as Sally. I mean, he was all the characters that you see.
The comic is the extension of the cartoonist, his ideas, his perspective on life. If he has certain views that he wants to express through the medium of cartooning, he should have the freedom to do that.
Yeah, I do have a higher purpose. I really do like to shatter, make people think, or at least invite people to think, and shatter just kind of traditional nonsense that we put up with on a daily basis for no good reason other than the fact that we just haven't the courage or the sensibility to question, why do I believe this?
I do feel like if I'm true to myself, I don't want to, I'm not really a sarcastic person. And for me to just sort of spew sarcasm in the strip because that's what people are doing would be dishonest.
I think the characters that I write and draw about aren't all good. They aren't all bad. You have characters that are likable, characters that are not so likable, but ultimately I want to show why.
I do whatever's on my mind that day, and so occasionally, and not always, but occasionally there's going to be my political thoughts on the world.
It's very satisfying to make people happy. I'm the kind of person who I don't need a lot for myself. You know, if you give me a baked potato and a can of pepper, like, I'm having a feast. So making other people happy is kind of what I like.
But I do love to work with Jeff, and he does a great job of the inking and the coloring on the pages. He does a lot of the extracurricular things that need to be done in the computer with the Family Circus, and he's a very valuable assistant. Hopefully someday he'll run away with the circus. And it is to me, a comfort to know that the Family Circus will stay in the family. There aren't many cartoonists who can say that.
Animals that teach us lessons go way far back in in human history, and I think animals do teach us lessons. And one of the things with mutts that I try to do more than most in the history of comics is to keep my animals as animal-like as possible, because I think that's where the real lessons are to be learned. I think we're a little removed from the natural world.
I think for most cartoonists, it's not really a conscious choice. It's really something almost that they were chosen to do, and they feel like it's what they have to do with their lives.
I don't want it to be over with. I've had such a ball. I've just had a marvelous time ever since I was a little kid. I was just always having fun.
Welcome.
It's nice to be here on the Today Show.
I love the comics.
Quick, is there a cartoonist in the house?
We're a tough crowd.
These questions were too difficult.
All right. I got orders. Boy, this is a tough joint here.
Hey, you can sing, dude.
My mic is bigger, dude.
What is it about mankind or womankind that gives you the most hope?
Linoleum.
Do we hug here or no?
I specifically mentioned nobody can touch me.
What is it about mankind that gives me the most hope?
You know, it's funny you would ask.
Laws, conveniences, safety rules.
Songs, dancing, baseball,
movies and TV and
jazz and baseball and
Basically, people are good. They're good.